Hello everyone, this is Professor Leon and this is Lecture 3, Organizing and Developing Paragraphs. Organizing Paragraphs. The argumentative essay structure consists of a thesis, points within the thesis statement, and then topic sentences that will then develop into body paragraphs. So this essay structure is basically a top-down structure, meaning that the most important ideas come first, followed by the least important ideas. Let's take a look at an example from one of our topics. On the left side, we have the thesis statement, and the thesis statement has 3 points: to help manage behavior patterns, create equal learning opportunities, and gather the necessary data used for further diagnosis are going to be developed into sections of the paper. Many writers believe that each point is only one paragraph each, but that's not necessarily true. So for each point, we want to create a section where we are going to develop multiple paragraphs. So for example, the tool to manage behavior problems could have a paragraph that might be developing how ADHD teens can use tools to help their outburst due to stress. And then the second paragraph could be talking about a tool to manage ADHD teens' anxiety when communicating with others. So again, as you can see here, each point is going to have multiple paragraphs and it's not going to be one paragraph. Just have that in mind. Within each particular body paragraph, there is also another structure. Each structure is going to have 4 different parts. So the first part is the topic sentence. This is one of the thesis points developed into a specific sentence. Then you're going to have the evidence, an explanation of the evidence, an explanation of how the evidence supports the topic sentence, and then you want to loop back to explain how that support explains the thesis. So basically 4 parts: the topic sentence, the evidence, the explanation of how the evidence supports the topic sentence, and then the explanation of how the evidence supports the thesis. Developing paragraphs. Many problems exist when developing paragraphs. Some paragraphs do not have enough explanation. The paragraph on the left-hand side has a topic sentence, it has a quote, and then it has just one sentence that explains the quote. This is not enough. There's not enough development. There should be more sentences on this section to explain that quote, which is right here. The paragraph on the right has the quote, and then it also has an explanation. The explanation, as you can see, has an example. So it really gets into detail in trying to explain what this quote means right here. What we want to do is just make sure that if we have some sort of piece of evidence, it could be a quote, it could be an example, that we really explain it and we do the 4 parts in the paragraph, which is write the topic sentence, include the evidence, include an explanation of what the evidence means, and then include an explanation of how that piece of evidence supports the topic sentence and the thesis. Another type of development problem is when the evidence is longer than the writer's explanation. So here we have a quote, but this quote is very, very long, as you can see, and there's not really enough explanation of this quote. What we want to do is we want to follow the 25%, 75% rule. In other words, 25% of the paragraph should be the quote. The other 75% of the paragraph should be your explanation and your support. The quote should be used to enhance your argument, not make the argument for you. So the paragraph on your right does have this quote, as you can see right here, but again, it takes a little bit more time to explain that quote. So it tries to explain it over here on this section. So again, just make sure that when you are going to include a longer quote, that you include equally longer explanation in your paragraph. The other type of development problem is when paragraphs have too many quotes. This paragraph starts with one quote, then it leads to another quote, and then it leads to yet a third quote. And this is not really supporting the paragraph because quotes necessitate explanation. Quotes themselves are not self-explanatory. Remember, you're taking a quote from its original context and you are implementing it in your paragraph. It's your responsibility as a writer to explain what that quote means. So on the right-hand side, this paragraph does have a quote, but then it also has an example. So it breaks down the quote, explains it, and also ties it back into the topic sentence of the paragraph. You can have also another quote and do the same thing, but we want a little bit of space to be able to explain what our quotes mean and tie them back to the topic sentences. Quality is better than quantity. Supporting paragraphs. One type of supporting paragraph issue is when the paragraph has weak or vague evidence. In this particular paragraph, the evidence is very vague because it doesn't really state a particular example, a particular type of statistic, or any specific type of detail. So here it says sociologist Sarah Johnson states, lots of children don't greet their parents when their parents get home from work. This quote is trying to support a paragraph that's arguing that there's a disconnection between families because digital technology has been responsible for creating this disconnection. But this quote doesn't really say anything because it's not specific enough. However, if we look at the quote on the paragraph to the right, here we actually see that there is some sort of data in terms of the number of times that children greet their parents. This quote is much better because it provides data on the frequency for which parents were greeted by their children, and not just saying that children don't greet their parents in general. So again, your evidence must be specific and not very vague. Another type of supporting paragraph error is when the paragraph has evidence that is irrelevant. This means that the quote or the example or the data that's included in the paragraph has really nothing to do with the topic sentence. If we read the topic sentence, political candidates are exploiting social media sites during elections to polarize voters on certain political issues. The quote right below it says more than 7 in 10 Americans use social media to connect with one another, engage with news content, and share information. We really don't know what the connection between this quote is to the topic sentence because the topic sentence is talking about how political candidates use social media to polarize their voters. The quote is talking about how Americans in general use social media to connect with one another. There's really no logical connection between the quote and the topic sentence. So let's look at the paragraph to our right. The topic sentence is the same, but now let's look at the quote. Polarization is the idea of us and them, and this ideology can and does cause confusion and tension between those with differing views. It's trying to define what polarization is. Why? Because the word polarize appears in the topic sentence. This is a good quote when there's an explanation of a term that is thrown into the topic sentence. We want to make sure that we have evidence that has to do with our topic sentence. If we just throw any type of evidence in our paragraph, that's not really going to support that paragraph well enough. When you have evidence, it should be specific and it should be relevant to the topic sentence. That reaches the end of our video. If you have any questions, you can email me. See you in the next live chat.